Princess Rena, the Princess and the Fox. Princess Rena. It was just another day at court as father listened into the idiotic suggestions of the multiple leeches that he called vassals argue which of my brothers should be made his heir, how the upcoming war was going to affect their wealth, and so on and so forth. It was like clockwork with how they repeated the same drivel each day. And, all the while, they ignored their actual problems. For instance, the kingdom is slowly running out of peasants, many of which are farmers, to fuel the war. This lack of farmers will cause a food shortage within the coming year as there won't be as many of them harvesting crops. The food shortage will make many nobles begin to hoard their own harvests from the kingdom, as well as their own subjects, leading to the lower classes becoming displeased with nobles. This will cause the nobles to distance themselves from their subjects in an effort to keep themselves safe, creating further division and strife. If allowed to continue, revolts are soon to follow which would put into question father's rule. I already predicted 5 nobles in the court right now who would try to maneuver these events into deposing and even killing father and the rest of his family, myself included. Yet, I had seen such an issue coming to pass years prior. Which is why I increased my efforts to mingle among the peasantry beyond what I normally did for my climb's happiness. I held no enjoyment in performing such menial work like they did, but it helped with endearing me to them beyond just the normal charity work I already performed. Additionally, it made my climb, my devoted knight, so much more in love with me. Really, that's all that I cared about, ensuring my future with my climb. If my climb wasn't so attached to the people of this kingdom and their prosperity, I would abscond from this doomed kingdom with my beloved climb in tow to somewhere secluded and use my pet in any way I wished without care of the opinions of court. And how I'd use him, I've dreamt for so long. Sadly, I still had to wait until I could finally make that dream a reality, something I've been working on for years. Father, for how easy it was to manipulate him to aid me in multiple ways, such as in my acts of charity or works to defeat the criminal organization 8 Fingers, would never allow my request of being with my climb to be granted. Even though he wouldn't force a marriage upon me, that didn't change his thoughts on what the status of my suitors should be. Unfortunately, even if I might be able to convince father otherwise, he'd likely be dead from age or assassin at that point. That left me with my brothers as another option. Both were like squabbling children over who should be allowed to play with their shiny toy. They were idiots, with only Zaynak being slightly more competent than Barbro. And I did not wish to see Barbro attain the throne, as he would immediately sell me off to some noble without a moment's hesitation. Zaynak wasn't likely to do that, namely because he already suspected what my true personality was actually like. That wasn't optimal, but I could still utilize his fear and hesitation for my benefit. He'd more than likely acquiesce to my request if I were to help him in attaining the throne. Father, with all due respect, we should increase the levies of the peasants, then our army would have little issue in crushing the Baharuths on the field of battle, Barbro stated to father with the confidence a brainless moron like him could spout. And I feel that it would be better to have the lords that have been sending the bare minimum of their troops to increase that amount before we increase the levies of our lands. For instance, Lord Danius Ulbrecht Clyburn has sent us only 1,439 of his men when he has 14,632 in reserve. Zaynak rebutted. How interesting that Zaynak chose that lord, especially because that lord is a well-known supporter of Barbro. Zaynak had an entire list of the nobles supporting Barbro's faction, and while I've no doubt that he's trying to avoid conscripting too many peasants of our own lands, he's also trying to weaken Barbro's faction as much as he could. Barbro glared at Zaynak before attacking the suggestion, you would have our vassals give up all of their troops when they are needed for protection of their lands? You'd leave them defenseless. Ah, yes, protection of the land was an interesting way of saying protection of my allies' troops. And from here, father will likely veto Zaynak's opinion and agree with Barbro's specifically so that he doesn't upset the nobles. The royalty faction was already at a tenuous position as is, and father knows this. It doesn't help that he's been too lax in keeping all of his vassals and their factions under heel, since he let it be for too long, in an attempt to be diplomatic and avoid conflict, Those vassals and factions have grown too powerful and can now legitimately challenge Father's power if they so wished. The only reason this hasn't happened is because every other faction that's cropped up has been keeping one another in check. That is not the case, Barbro. You put words in my mouth. Zanak shot back as he tried standing his ground against the imposing figure of our elder brother stepping up to him. The only thing I see being put in your mouth is the words of a coward who wants to weaken the vassals of the king, Barbro stated. Besides, why should Father listen to you, little brother, when you haven't even taken to the field of battle like I have? Zanak took a step closer to Barbro and glared up into his eyes. Just because you may have talent in leading an army, it doesn't mean that you have any in running a kingdom, besides into the ground that is. I could already see the members of both of my brother's factions beginning to take sides behind either idiot. Before it could go any further, Father finally spoke, his voice echoing throughout the room, "Enough." Every noble in the room turned to look at Father as he held his hand up. "My sons, both of your suggestions have merit." While Father stopped speaking as his eyes widened and he looked past the bickering nobles. At the same time, the sounds of weapons being drawn by the guards, including Gazif, filled the room with a warning of danger. Quite quickly, the guards moved their way past the nobles and held their weapons towards a dark portal of magic that had appeared in the middle of the hall. Before Gazif could order a command to the guards, a golden throne slid out from the portal and quickly stopped on the red carpet leading up to Father's throne. Soon after, the portal closed behind it and everyone's eyes focused on the fearful ones of Alecto, Father's cousin, who sat in the golden throne unmoving. One thing I took note of was the garish crown of gold and jewels on top of his head that drew attention to the long headrest at the back of the throne which said King 8 Fingers. Additionally, I saw how he seemed fused into the throne as gold seemed to either cover or merge with his arms and legs. It was obvious enough to tell that some type of magic must have been used to do this. Yet, before any of us could say a word, Alecto spoke first. King 8 Fingers was sent here in punishment by the goddess known as the Fox Princess. Alecto announced, causing a stir within the throne room. That left many questions for me to fill in the gaps for. It would have to be someone of great power to not care about harming the cousin of the king. If a goddess really was involved, not that I could fully believe it, then that left why she might possibly be punishing him. And from what he's called himself, along with the name written in that throne, I suspected that he was in league with the criminal organization 8 Fingers. If that was the case, then I was happy to see one of their own be dealt with since they have been an annoying thorn in my side. As part of my efforts to maintain my pure image devoted to aiding the less fortunate, along with trying to make this kingdom a better place for my climb, I had to get involved in hindering the group's activities. Fighting them has certainly benefited my reputation, and it made my climb so happy, but the downsides to it were almost not worth the effort. 8 Fingers wants me dead. They, and the multiple nobles working with them, all did. I've had to deal with a few assassination attempts because of it, but because I'm not a brainless princess with a heart of gold like almost everyone thinks I am, it was easy enough to foil these plots. Another hindrance to me is that the nobles working for 8 Fingers have done everything in their power to delay or prevent any policy or action I perform. 2 such policies were the crackdown on illicit drugs and the outlaw of slavery, which I got enacted because my client told me one day of how much he wished that such would cease. I ensured that all of it would happen for my darling Climb. Every time he looked at me with those innocent eyes of his that saw me as a perfect saint of a princess filled me with an excitement beyond description. And yet, I couldn't help but feel frustrated as all the extra work that 8 Fingers and their people put me through got between the time that me and my climb should have. If it wasn't for the front I needed to continue putting up, I would relish torturing the leaders of 8 Fingers for getting in my way. See, cousin? What has happened to you? Father asked in shock. King 8 Fingers is the leader of the criminal organization known as 8 Fingers. King 8 Fingers took over the leadership role of the group after King 8 Fingers' father died. All of this was in an effort to have you, cousin, rendered as incompetent to rule so that your sons would take the throne or, if already murdered beforehand, like King 8 Fingers planned to do, then King 8 Fingers would be made king, Alecto said, causing everyone to gasp or comment in shock at the admittance. I had to copy the same reaction that everyone else was making, even if I wanted to smile and laugh at the punishment Alecto was undergoing. It was like divine providence to see one of the people that has been delaying my plans suffer like this. I'd really have to thank this fox princess for saving me the headache of dealing with one of the group's leaders. "You traitorous bastard," Barbaro exclaimed as he drew his sword and seemed ready to march over and lop our traitorous cousin's head off. "Barbaro, stop," Father commanded, stopping my elder brother's march. Barbaro looked back to Father in confusion. "Why, Father? This traitor has admitted his guilt and needs to be punished," Barbaro explained. "And yet, it seems that my cousin, Alecto, has been bewitched somehow. This could be some method to have him killed by a political rival or by 8 Fingers. Weemoose Father was quickly interrupted by Alecto, who hadn't moved at all since he had come, not even a nod of his head in agreement with Father. The goddess known as the Fox Princess gave King 8 Fingers 2 orders. One is to explain everything about King 8 Fingers' criminal empire known as 8 Fingers along with King 8 Fingers' reasoning behind it. The second order is for King 8 Fingers to only ever refer to King 8 Fingers as King 8 Fingers. Father pondered aloud, with his hand under his chin. This is just so hard to accept. That certainly explains King 8 Fingers' colorful dialogue. But if he truly meant what he said, that he must explain everything about 8 Fingers, then I had a few questions for him. Changing my expression to one of worry before asking Father with a demure tone, "Father, I feel so awful that our cousin could have betrayed us like this. But if it is the truth, then shouldn't we try and discover who else might have led this organization that has harmed the innocent subjects of the Riestais?" Father looked at me with a soft smile before he nodded, "Yes, even if there is much doubt in this, the fact of the matter is that someone went to a lot of trouble to send Alecto before us like this." Then, he looked back to Alecto, "Cousin, tell me, if you truly are the leader of 8 Fingers, then who are the other heads of your organization?" "King 8 Fingers is the leader of 8 Fingers. Under King 8 Fingers' leadership are 7 others. One was Lubelina, who was thought to be dead after a fire burned down her brothel in this city. She was replaced by Prian Polson until he was likely killed a few minutes ago by monsters that King 8 Fingers couldn't see. Following him was Zero, who the Fox Princess killed personally soon after Prian died. Next was Noah Zweden, who the Fox Princess trapped within a statue of gold until he dies a few days from now. Raglin Zolba was locked into a crate like he did for transporting slaves, and will be taken on his normal smuggling route around the kingdom until his likely death. Hilma Signeus and Ampatif Coco Doll are both likely dead at this point, or at least, that's what the Fox Princess alluded to. I found myself taking notice of the few nobles who seemed to become very nervous when Hilma Signeus was brought up. Of what I know about her, besides what I potentially suspected, she's a high-class escort that I've spotted around the palace once or twice. The thought of her being near my climb upset me, but it wasn't enough to affect my facial expression. I really had to thank this Fox Princess for punishing such a worthless being. Alecto continued, "The only living members of the 8 of King 8 Fingers and King 8 Fingers Associates is King 8 Fingers, Lubelina, and Countess Elk Bernard von Dalton too. Aside from King 8 Fingers, the other 2 were likely horrifically punished. The name of Count Dalton was very familiar with everyone at court considering his title and how prolific he was at interacting with nobles from around the kingdom. That was shocking to say the least. But it did help explain my suspicions on how 8 Fingers could be so entrenched in nobility. Aside from Alecto, Count Dalton was well known for his constant interactions with the various circles of nobility, and all of this was due, in part, because of the Fox Princess. Gazif was the one to ask as he sheathed the teal blade of his magical sword. "Yes. The goddess known as the Fox Princess has dedicated herself to destroying 8 Fingers for, Alecto's mouth didn't move and he remained silent for a moment before continuing, as if nothing happened, and ruining the lives of many innocent people. Could it be that he was bewitched to not say something more that he knows? Maybe I should try to test it out?" Changing my tone to one that was a mixture between vapid and curious, I innocently asked Alecto, "See cousin Alecto, what else do you know about this fox princess? She sounds fairy, but she also seems righteous, even if her methods are quite cruel." For everyone else in the room, all they heard was the kind princess being both curious and scared upon hearing about this strange goddess. None understood what I was actually fishing for from dear cousin Alecto. The goddess known as the Fox Princess is, Alecto stopped speaking and he froze once more before coming out of this trance and speaking. That is all King Eight Fingers knows about her. That told me all I needed to know, but I still needed to act confused about Alecto's behavior in front of the others. "Why is he acting like that?" I asked while looking to Father. Father's eyes studied Alecto a bit longer before he finally spoke. "I'm not certain. This is something I've never seen before." "I believe that I know what this is, Your Majesty," Gazif said. "He's bewitched to not speak of what he knows about this Fox Princess. He's only allowed to say that she is a goddess called the Fox Princess or whatever punishments she inflicted upon his group. Aside from this, nothing else will leave his lips. If it's some magical nonsense, then why not bring in one of the mages from the Magicians Guild to dispel this bewitchment?" The fat noble, Count Brandon, offered as an idea. "Then, we can find out what this Fox Princess doesn't want us to know." "Perhaps," Father said in agreement before looking over to one of the guards, "go to the Magicians Guild and fetch one of the mages specializing in dispelling magics." The guard nodded in answer and quickly made his way out of the throne room towards the guild. That would likely take him almost an hour to get there and then head back with a mage in tow. Then, Father looked upon our cousin with a gaze before speaking. "Now, while we wait for a mage to be brought here, I wish to hear more of what Alecto has to say under this supposed bewitchment of truth. So, cousin, you've mentioned Count Azelk being in thrall of Eight Fingers. Which other nobles are you aware of that have been in your employ?" "Two nobles that King Eight Fingers knows of that are currently in this room are Count Brandon Elswin Galdwin and Viscount Randall Ulverwise." As soon as those two names were uttered, both men had the eyes of the entire throne room focused on them. It almost made me laugh at the way that Brandon was the first in the room to want to dispel this bewitchment upon Alecto. No wonder. He didn't want his name to be connected to Eight Fingers while Alecto was still forced to tell the truth. Yet, there was also a single moment and I spotted Barbro look relieved. Interesting. Why would he appear so relieved over what Alecto said, or didn't say? Brother, you've made some interesting friends, haven't you?" Father glared at the two nobles in suspicion as they seemed to almost quiver under the attention. At least, Randall still quivered as his already fair features grew even paler, making the man look a skeleton in a white wig wearing blue silk clothing. Brandon seemed to control himself and attempted to remain calm under the suspicion. "Lords Brandon and Randall, is there any truth in what Alecto says?" Father asked. "Of course not, Your Majesty. This is just lies forced in Lord Alecto's mouth by this spell upon him. I have only ever been loyal to the crown with no ties to such criminal activities." Brandon answered as confidently as possible. "Just as Lord Brandon says, I would never taint mine, nor my family's, honor by working with Eight Fingers." Randall added. "Yet, once the seed of doubt was put into the minds of everyone, it's quite difficult to remove." Father's gaze flitted between Brandon and Randall before looking over to Alecto. "Alecto, do you have any proof to these claims against either lord?" "Yes, King Eight Fingers has many documents of proof stored in King Eight Fingers' office within King Eight Fingers' estate. Lord Brandon was well known for giving access to his estate as a depot to store numerous amounts of narcotics. He has written off any money he has received for it as payment for crops to evade any suspicion from the kingdom. As for Lord Randall, he would allow Eight Fingers to use his many barns to store slaves before they would be transported across the kingdom to each city. He wrote off any profits he received as livestock." Father was silent for a few moments of contemplation before announcing, "Guards, take Lords Brandon and Randall into custody until their proof can be determined. As soon as this is done, send investigators to each of their properties to determine if what Alecto says is correct." Once his commands were given, guards surrounded both accused nobles with their weapons drawn while the pair of nobles looked incredulously at Father. "Your Majesty, you are making a terrible mistake," Lord Brandon shouted. "This is all just lies from a spell. We've never done anything of what we're being accused of," Lord Randall shouted in tandem. Both continued making such pleas and excuses as they were taken out of the throne room and to the royal cells to await their proof of guilt or innocence. It was hilarious to watch them suffer the humiliation of being dragged from the throne room, just as they so enjoyed trying to humiliate me whenever I proposed a suggestion to Father. Though, truthfully, I really couldn't care less if my suggestions of improving the kingdom were enacted or not. Just the attempt of doing so already improved the public's opinion of me. It's more about the principle of the matter. They got in my way and tried to humiliate me, so I would relish any tragedy that befell them, just as I would anyone else. "Your Majesty, are you certain that it is wise to lock up Lords Brandon and Randall like this? These allegations are still currently baseless, and it could imply, even if the thoughts were unfounded, that you are simply using this to get rid of political opponents." Duke Antonio, a bootlicker of Barbaro, asked. The man was a young head of house after his father died in the fire that took the whorehouse in the city. Just like Barbaro, he was spoiled and arrogant, with more muscle than brain in his head. His body certainly fit the image, with him being well muscled with a face matching the image one might have of a knight in a fairy tale. Probably his largest weakness as a newly made duke was that he lacked perspective on exactly how the world worked. He was one of the nobles in agreement with greatly increasing our army's levies while ignoring the problems the kingdom would face if the farmers and crafters of the kingdom are unable to do their work. He'll run the dukedom of Rue-le-Bel into the ground within a decade based on what I've seen of him currently. Well, that's if he even gets the chance to, considering that I've predicted that the Baharuth Empire will conquer us even sooner. I've been drawing up escape plans for myself and my climb since I first came to the realization of this prediction. I've already been setting aside a fund for that moment along with methods of transport out of the city. From there, I have a few locations set aside which we'd go to based on how the invasion occurs. Then, I would have my climb all to myself. This is a risk that I must take, Lord Antonio. When I have fully uncovered the truth of the matter, I will make my next move. I don't imprison them just for the protection of the kingdom, but also for the protection of them as well. If these allegations are false, then it will mean that Lords Brandon and Randall have been made the targets of a plot against them and are now in danger. Father reasoned. I couldn't disagree with how Father's reached this thought process, but I felt that everything Alecto has said has been the truth. It would be too much work otherwise to magically enchant an innocent man to lie about the involvement of multiple people with 8 fingers. That would require setting up evidence all across the kingdom against high-standing nobles and figures. With an operation that large, it would be exceedingly difficult to keep it quiet, especially with criminals. Finally, the method of magic used to transport Alecto would require a spellcaster with a great amount of power. I knew this due to making some inquiries to the Magicians' Guild under the guise of wishing to transport food to the needy in far-off villages. In actuality, I was singling out methods of escaping the city if it was needed. Sadly, from what I was told, teleportation magic was beyond the skill of most mages in the world. As such, it was a useless prospect. Still, a spellcaster, like this goddess, would be wasting their time and talents in faking their attack on 8 fingers when they could just actually do it. But with what I know of spellcasters, considering my knowledge of the adventuring group Blue Rose and their spellcaster Evil Eye, the Fox Princess was even stronger. I guess this as, even with all of the power Blue Rose had at their disposal, they haven't been able to stomp out 8 fingers as quickly the Fox Princess has. But that did bring up an interesting idea on how to capitalize on this unique situation that was literally dropped in the throne room. I could foster further goodwill among the people by hiring a few adventuring groups to hunt down and finish any 8 fingers operations still running. It would take a week or 2 for news to spread that the leadership of the organization had been captured or killed. From there, chaos would ensue as anyone in 8 fingers would either remain to continue operations or distances themselves to avoid suffering the same fate as their superiors. There would likely be a 2-week reprieve as Eight Fingers tried reorganizing itself and new leadership began to make themselves known. During this 3-week interim, they'd be at their most vulnerable, making it a perfect time to strike at their operations. I could get a message out to request for adventurers. From there, I could learn about Eight Fingers' operations from Father or, if he lacked the required knowledge, from Alecto himself, since the man's enchantment seemed to force him to speak the truth about Eight Fingers. I also doubted that any mage Father had summoned could break what afflicted Alecto, otherwise the Fox Princess wouldn't have let him so easily explain his bewitchment to us. Allegations or not, shouldn't we try to get cousin Alecto out of the binds of this throne he's in? Zaynak questioned as he studied Alecto's predicament. Gazif and another guard strode over to Alecto and examined his throne and what bound him, making testing pulls at the gold on Alecto's limbs before ceasing their attempts. Both men turned to Father and shook their heads. There are no binds tying Lord Alecto to this throne, my lords. His limbs have been merged into the gold of the throne. Gazif answered, much to the grim realization of the other nobles in the room. It would either take magic to undo this, a smith to attempt breaking the metal apart, which could result in Lord Alecto limbs being crippled, or the removal of Lord Alecto's limbs. That's absolutely horrific. Duke Wyburn Andros Tail remarked while his face blanched. He was an older man with a portly figure covered in a blue silken shirt, white trousers, fine leather boots that have never touched dirt, and a green coat with golden buttons that were more of a fashion statement considering his coat could never come together over his portly stomach. Duke Wyburn's thinning grey hair was combed over to hide his growing bald spot, only drawing greater attention to it. He was part of the royalty faction in support of Father. Yet, the one thing I am aware of, which Father is not or just pretends not to be, is that Duke Wyburn is actually in support of Zaynak's faction. He's done well to hide it, but I have slowly pieced together his true allegiance through the way he interacts around my brother and the conversations I've overheard. My lord, considering what Lord Alecto said earlier. If it's true, one could consider this to be divine punishment, Gazif stated, the hint of a joke in his tone. Then again, considering how the nobles here have treated Gazif, arguably one of the reasons the Re-Estize's army has done so well during the continual wars against the Baharuth. He certainly does have reason to find amusement when one of said nobles endured their comeuppance. And yet, even after all of the insults and poor treatment by most of the nobles besides Father, Gazif still managed to remain professional and disciplined throughout. I could respect him, partially, for that. But really, the main reason for my respect of Gazif Stranov came from how my climb looked up to the man, someone to aspire to and emulate. It made me that much happier and more excited when my climb focused on me with that enhanced dutiful mind of his. It's senseless cruelty, Sir Gazif. Regardless of any potential misdeeds, Lord Alecto is of noble lineage and deserves to be treated as such. Duke Wyburn argued back. This sorceress that claims to be a goddess should be brought for judgment over her treatment of the distinguished members of our kingdom. Duke Wyburn, Marquis Revan, a man with slicked-back blonde hair and a cream-colored tunic and trousers, said, while you are correct that treatment of nobility like this is reprehensible, looking to make enemies of an unknown being, either powerful sorceress or goddess, is not wise at this time. We know very little about the Fox Princess, but I doubt that we can say the same about what she knows of us. Marquis Revan was a man whose loyalty constantly seemed to flip between the royalty faction and nobility faction, yet, the overarching faction he constantly remained tied to was that of the 6 great nobles. They were a group that held almost 30% of the land of the Re-Estize. This made them the most dangerous political faction for Father to butt heads against, since they, combined, had more than enough power to cause a civil war. Something which the kingdom could not survive with the Baharuth continually grinding through its forces. Do some of us have some, if any, knowledge of this sorceress known as the Fox Princess? My father questioned the gathered nobles. I was actually interested in hearing this, as her sudden appearance and actions were already helping me, even if she hadn't planned for it. I might, Your Majesty. Another of the members of the 6 great nobles, Marquis Bloomrush, announced. This drew everyone's attention upon him, not that he showed any issue with it. I have been hearing a few rumors coming from Rantle that one of my merchants told me the other day. It was about a goddess discovered in the great forest of Tog who had 9 tails and the ears of a fox. It was said that she managed to conjure a mountainous tree in the center of the great lake of Tog. Merchant? I wasn't aware that Marquis Bloomrush employed any merchants. That was odd. A woman with multiple tails and bestial ears? Is there anything else you were told about this goddess besides her ability to conjure trees? Duke Wyvern almost seemed to demand from the Marquis. Aside from her beauty, she has powerful magic and an army of monstrous foxes at her beck and call. Marquis Bloomrush answered. This made Father's face become fixed into an expression of concern. Goddess or not, it's immensely concerning to hear talk of an unknown entity amassing an army within my kingdom's borders. Father remarked. That was when I noticed Barbro's expression transform into a grin as his eyes became filled with some inane plot. Finally, he came to a conclusion and spoke out, Father, while you sort through the truth of what Cousin Electo says, why not allow me to take an army of 1,000 through the great forest of Tog to uncover the truth of this sorceress? I could also use this excursion to secure our borders to the Baharuth before heading directly north into the forest towards the lake. Besides, you've always shown interest in establishing a presence in the forest, and by taking my troops through it, we can cut down any monster in our path to establish a foothold. Quite interesting that Barbro wanted to leave the capital so quickly. Almost like he didn't want to be around the area in case something inconvenient were to be discovered. Even aside from hastiness, this was very ambitious of my older brother. His plan would also attempt to prove his worth to Father through this grand gesture of responsibility as quickly as possible. This would also do well in overshadowing any attempt that Zanak would make to impress Father. Yet, it was so childish and ill-thought of Barbro. He severely underestimated the power of mages, just like most every noble here, including Father. Barbro didn't believe the Fox Princess a goddess, nor whatever size and power her army of foxes might be. And that didn't even include the rest of Barbro's plan. Barbro was spreading his net too wide in an effort to capture glory. He could get all of his men to the border without issue, but marching them up to the forest without any real plan besides cutting his way through any monsters encountered was going to get his troops quickly killed. Barbro knows of the 3 great rulers of Tob, but he probably assumed that throwing enough troops at the powerful monsters would bring them down. And that didn't even take into account how Barbro would likely act once he finally met the Fox Princess. His skills at diplomacy left a lot to be desired, as he was just as likely to demand the Fox Princess to sleep with him as he was to create diplomatic ties with her. Due to being spoiled, my older brother was used to being given everything he wanted. That mentality would hinder any discussion that might require Barbro to concede something or be denied. It would be hilarious if he got himself killed after throwing a tantrum to someone stronger than him. Not that I would really care if he did die. I didn't care if any of my family died actually. Well, I would care if Father died since my plans were easier to complete with him still alive. If he could survive less than 2 more years from his advanced age or assassination attempt, then I would be fully confident with being independent from him. Father could die then. Your proposal does have merit to it. Father admitted, but would 1,000 men be enough to accomplish this? Barbro looked pleased at Father's admittance. With 2,000 more men, I guarantee that nothing would prevent me from completing this task, Father, Barbro said with a bow. Father considered this for a bit longer before nodding. I'll allow it, my son. Father finally allowed. Then I shall take my leave at once. I will be back within 2 months with news of my success. Saying this, my idiotic elder brother turned around and made his leave, but not before sneering at Electo as he passed. Soon after, Barbro left the throne room with a flourish of his cape. Just as I thought that the nobles would go back to interrogating Electo, Father spoke directly to me, my daughter, I believe that what will be discussed next with Electo is not something that should sully your ears. Overprotective fool. I wanted to know more of 8 Fingers without needing to question Electo on my own and possibly receiving unneeded questions. I really wanted to tell father that I didn't need delicate treatment like this, but that wasn't how the golden princess persona I fostered would act. Instead, I smiled to father and nodded, "Of course, father." Though, I did throw out one last attempt for easy access to information before I needed to work for it, "But if you were to fulfill one request from me, would you be willing to tell me if there are any plots from that awful organization which may be affecting the people that I've been aiding? I wish to protect them so, and they have such difficult lives without the cruel shadow of 8 fingers looming over them." I heard the chuckling of a few nobles as they listened to my plea. They only saw the innocent princess trying to help those poor innocent commoners, not understanding all the serious topics occurring around her. But the reaction of those nobles didn't matter, only father's did. The quirk of father's lips into that slow smile, followed by the slight twinkle in his eyes, told me that the man would do it. He was so easy to read after these many years of doing so. "Yes, dear Renna. I'll inform you about anything that might be harming those you've charitably taken care of." I gave father a thankful nod and curtsy. "Thank you so much, father," I said as cutely as I could before making my way out of the throne room and past Alecto. I could only wish the man luck, since he was most likely going to be a dead man soon enough. Upon making it outside, I found my Climb waiting for me like the loyal knight he was. "Climb," I said happily as I ran up to my knight and smiled. My Climb gave a smile of his own as he gave a quick bow. "Princess Renna, how was the meeting with King Ramposa and the nobles?" I saw some commotion occur when a knight ran out, followed a few minutes later by Lord Brandon and Lord Randall being escorted out by guards. "Is everything safe for you, my lady?" Oh, my Climb has no idea how excited it makes me whenever I hear him refer to me like that. Putting on the act of a worried girl, I gave a cautious look around us before answering, "I'm not certain, Climb. I fear that it might be best if we discuss this in my study. It worries me." My Climb took on a serious look as he gave me a nod. His stance also shifted to one that became more protective as my Climb looked around for any hidden threats. "Of course, Princess Renna." We then walked away from the throne room and towards the grand staircase. During this time, I enjoyed all the attention that my Climb showered me. And yet, that didn't prevent me from noticing the looks that some of the guards and servants gave to my Climb. They saw him as lesser in comparison to them due to having been taken from the streets as an orphan and given his permanent place at my side. I made certain that any who made insult to my Climb and his humble origins would hear from me. The servants were easy to cow into line. And if they truly displeased me, I could have them kicked out of the palace. The guards were more difficult as they were stubborn, and father didn't like to fire any well-trained guard unless there was good reason to. That just made me become more creative in my methods of punishing them. For instance, I remember early on when my Climb was first being trained as a knight that his instructor was unfairly harsh on him in comparison to the other trainees. It was quite the scandal when some of the crown jewels were discovered to have been stolen by the man. I felt so awful when I heard that this instructor was executed for the crime of stealing from the royal family. At the very least, the next instructor brought in was much kinder to my Climb. Just like my Climb would try to protect me from all threats against my life, I, as his mistress, would ensure that he would always be safe and mine. After enough time, we had finally arrived to my study, which was adjacent to my bedroom. My Climb opened the door for me and I walked inside before he followed after me, closing the door behind us. Inside my study, one would find bookcases filling the walls with topics of study that most would not expect a princess to be interested in, like politics, economic studies, farming, and so on. Multiple lamps lit the seconds of the room that the sunlight coming from massive window behind my desk couldn't reach. Each lamp was crafted with a magical spell of flame imbued into them. This allowed the lamps to stay lit without the need for wick and oil that a normal lamp required. Throughout the room, scattered within the hollow interiors of a few fake books, were funds and items of value that I kept for emergency. Yet, they didn't compare to the deeds of ownership I had hidden within the secret compartments of my desk. Each one was to a plot of land, a building, or a business under a hidden name. Unknown to any of my family or the court, I owned 2 shops that manufactured textiles, a pharmacy, and a smithy within the city. I chose each business because of how widely their individual markets were. Textiles were always in need by the poor and rich alike. Additionally, I could offload any excess material for charity under my name. My pharmacy had a glut of noble and wealthy customers, which typically produced the most excess income that I could reinvest into my other businesses or pay for any of my altruistic plans when the aid Father gave me wasn't enough. The smithy probably had the largest number of clients and activity due to being strategically placed near the city's Adventurers Guild. It didn't make as much usable profit as the pharmacy since the cost of materials was higher, but it did give me an ear to the Adventurers Guild as they had a wealth of information that my workers could get out of any adventurer that stopped by. I've spent years making profits from these businesses for the sake of my climb and his wish to make the re-estais better. Yet, the longer I do this, the more I see how futile it is to continue attempting to improve this doomed kingdom. The only reason I haven't ceased my altruistic operations and fully invested in our eventual escape is because it would make my climb upset. I would never allow my knight, my climb, my pet to be unhappy. Princess Rena, what happened within the throne room that upset you so? My climb was so adorable when he acted worried around me. Climb, it is only us here. You can just call me Rena, I said, taking on the appearance of a blushing princess. My climb looked cutely flustered before nodding. I apologize, Rena. It's hard to avoid being formal when I have to maintain proper etiquette in public. One of these days, soon enough, I would hear him screaming my name just like that in pure ecstasy. You never need to apologize to me, Climb, I assured him as I placed my hand on his warm cheek. But as for your question, a strange act of magic occurred within the throne room earlier. With it, Father's cousin, Lord Electo, arrived through a dark portal while merged into a golden throne. More chillingly, he was enchanted to reveal that he was being punished by a goddess known as the Fox Princess for his hand in being the leader of 8 Fingers. My climb looked shocked as he gently took my hand on his face into both of his. Rena, are you okay after seeing and hearing such a thing? Is it certain that Lord Electo was telling the truth? He asked gently. Sadly, I feel in my heart that everything Cousin Electo has said was real. It's even the reason that Lords Brandon and Randall were escorted out of the throne room by the guards. Cousin Electo named them directly as actively working for 8 Fingers. With calculating movement, I changed my expression to that of a distraught princess and pulled my climb into a hug. It's just so awful that such powerful nobles so close to my family could be affiliated with that terrible organization, I said with a saddened tone. I did my best to hide the shiver of excitement I felt when my climb wrapped his arms around me in an effort to comfort me. I can't imagine how you must be feeling, Rena. To learn of those nobles being corrupt is terrifying to consider. Is there anything I might be able to do to help you? I pulled away from my climb and changed my expression to one of relief as I met his gaze. You being here is already of immense help. I relished seeing the small glint of pleasure that mixed with the happiness in his eyes. But there is one other request that you could perform, which would aid not just myself, but so many other innocent people that are vulnerable to 8 Fingers. My climb became filled with a resolve as he looked at me. Name whatever you may need of me, Rena. I will do everything I can to ensure that it is done. I loved just how excitable my pet was when I gave him a request. Thank you, my dear Climb, I said with my sweet tone of appreciation. I feel that if I am to protect the innocent people of this kingdom, it would be best to bring in, not just the soldiers of the kingdom, but also the enlisted aid of adventurers to raid nearby operations of 8 Fingers before news of not just Electo's capture, but the capture or deaths of every other leader of 8 Fingers becomes known. All of them captured or dead? My climb asked in astonishment. Yes. And by the very same goddess that sent Cousin Electo to the throne room, enchanted to tell the truth. I answered with a nod. That's both remarkable and terrifying. My climb said in a stupefied tone before regaining his faculties. I'll head straight to the guild to make the request. Is there anyone in particular that you wish to hire? Preferably those that have had experience in dealing with 8 Fingers before. I believe that the group, Blue Rose, is in the city or nearby at the very least. They've had a lot of experience in dealing with 8 fingers. I just want to make sure that anyone requested for has as little a chance of getting hurt as possible. I'll make certain it is done. My climb said as he broke away from me before giving me a bow. Thank you for helping me in this task, my dear climb, I said with an expression of gratitude. Always, Renna. My climb said before exiting my study and closing the door behind himself. As soon as he left, I began to slip out of the golden princess facade I had been putting up. Then, I heard a voice behind me and to my right by the bookshelves. For a princess, you certainly have a varied taste in reading material. The powerful, yet sultry, voice of a woman remarked. Quickly turning around and backing away in preparation to scream, I found myself looking at a woman in risque dress of white with a strange conical white hat that was faced towards the bookshelf with one of my tomes in hand. Yet, it was the features I instantly took note of that caused my scream to die in my throat. 9 golden tails lazily waved behind her while a pair of matching ears stuck out from holes cut near the top of her hat. This had to be the Fox Princess. But why was she here in my study? Could she have some awareness of my true personality and be here to punish me? No, I don't believe so. From her actions against 8 fingers and its leadership, she was too altruistic to allow my true self to outweigh the good I have performed and am still performing. That was even if she was aware of my true self. Another reason for her arrival here could also be due to her wishing to acquire an ally of high status to aid her in whatever endeavor she wishes to achieve. But I would need to tread lightly before then. For now, I'll continue to maintain my persona as the golden princess around her until she gives me reason not to. How long have you been here? I asked with a meek voice to let the Fox Princess feel she had more power in the conversation than what she had already. It would serve to get a measure of her personality. Just a little bit before you and your boyfriend got here. You two do make for quite the cute couple. She answered with a teasing tone at the end. I felt split on the matter. One part of me felt vindicated satisfaction that a person of the Fox Princess's supposed power saw my climb as rightfully mine. The other part of me was terrified at calculating just what she might possibly be hinting at. Has she been watching me before? If so, for how long? I will continue to maintain my demeanor as I haven't been called out on it just yet. I thank you for your kind words. I replied as I changed my expression to shyly look away from the Fox Princess as a blush filled my face. I got a view of her face as she looked over her shoulder at me with a pair of glowing golden eyes with vertical slits for pupils. A translucent veil covered her lower face, but even then, I could see her smiling at me in amusement. Oh, I see that the blushing princess isn't even denying her infatuation. A knight and a princess in love is a very romantic tale, don't you think? As she said this, the Fox Princess stored away the book before she fully turned to me and began sauntering over, the tall heels of her white boots clicking throughout the room. One thing I easily took note of, now that I could see her from the front without her tails obscuring it, is that she was very well figured. Another was her body language, which told me how confident she felt, even in the heart of the king's palace. This goddess could very likely kill everyone in this palace and not even break a sweat while doing so. I needed to be very careful. Finally, she stood before me, studying my form with curiosity and interest. Even if I was acting before, I couldn't help but feel insignificant and helpless in front of her now. Climb is just my guardian knight, my lady. I answered like the good princess would. The hormones I could smell coming off the pair of you from that unresolved sexual tension would say otherwise. Please tell me that you're both aware of that, at least? She asked, which confused me. Why was she continuing to comment on the relationship that my climb and I had? Was she trying to threaten me with my climb's life? I care for Climb dearly. I believe that he feels similarly to me, but my knight cares about my future more than his own happiness. I answered, playing along to whatever game she was making me go through. Is it because your status is too far apart from one another? The Fox Princess asked with an expression of interest fully visible through her veil. Yes. As princess of the Reisti's kingdom, father, and the other nobles, would never approve of me being in a romantic relationship with a commoner. I answered honestly. Interesting. The goddess mused aloud. Though, if I am to be truly honest, I think that a smart girl like yourself is already looking into ways to change that. Smart? I intentionally stammered. Considering the books in your library that I can tell were read, and that you managed to single-handedly abolish slavery in this kingdom while having relatively little political power, I think that requires a bit more intelligence than a run-of-the-mill person would have. And that doesn't even mention the crackdown against the narcotics being peddled by 8 Fingers that you've been leading. As the Fox Princess said this, I realized that even if the truth of my intelligence has been discovered, that didn't mean my personality was. I only need to adjust my current facade to match the intelligence while keeping everything else hidden. Giving her a practiced sigh, I spoke, "You are correct, Fox Princess." She gave me a satisfied smile as I said this. I've spent years keeping the truth of my true intelligence hidden, as acting like a simple and naive princess with well-meant intentions puts my opponents at ease. I likely could not have accomplished half my charitable works if the nobles with power knew exactly how well I've planned around them. You have done admirably in that. Enough so, that the leaders, former leaders, the Fox Princess said with a giggle, of 8 Fingers all wanted you dead. I find that to be quite impressive. For a goddess to give me praise, that is an astounding compliment. At least, I believe you are possibly a goddess. But it could also turn out that you are simply a powerful mage that is utilizing a pretentious title to more easily intimidate the nobles that were in the throne room. Yet, I doubt that intimidation was the only reason for your display. I watched her body language shift at this as her tails no longer swayed aimlessly. Now all were posed in my direction like an audience whose attention I had captured. No, not just intimidation, and neither was it just punishment. You already knew that he'd suffer from the sheer shame and embarrassment he received in combination with his throne and magical compulsion. Keeping an eye on her entire body, the Fox Princess showed all the signs of being receptive to my current assessment, so I continued, "You wanted people to know you did it." A quick twitch from her tails almost made me want to smile. "You needed them to know that you did it." I figured her out. After all, what is a/goddess without worshippers? She finished together with me. A few of her tails slowly began to wag behind her like a dog's would. "Now that is a very neat skill of yours. Anything further you can tell about me with it?" she asked, almost like a child wanting to see a mage perform a simple spell for them. Before, she had been interested in me for my altruistic actions. Now, she was just purely interested in me as a person. A moment later, a chair of gold appeared behind her and she sat down before provocatively crossing her legs in what seemed to be a habitual manner. A golden chair appeared behind me and I sat down in the offered chair. Both from what she had said earlier about my climb and her actions right now in combination with her clothing choice, I could surmise that teasing others was a large habit of her personality. That also meant that she probably wasn't subtly threatening my climb's life earlier. From what I saw in the throne room, you are particularly creative with your punishments, vindictive even. Additionally, with what Alecto was unable to say, I would guess that 8 Fingers did something directly to you, which is why you so quickly went after them. Probably within the last month or so, since this would have happened earlier considering what I can only guess of your abilities. Correct again, Princess Renna. The Fox Princess admitted openly as I couldn't find any lie in her body language. 8 Fingers did some very heinous things to my eldest daughter. Besides punishing the ones in charge, I want to see the rest of their organization burn. Despite her smiling visage, I saw animalistic rage burn in her eyes before they became calm once again. It was extremely easy to guess exactly the type of heinous things done to the goddess daughter. Though I did wonder if her daughter was even a full goddess if she was able to be captured by 8 Fingers. A demigoddess, perhaps. Or adoption is the other possibility. Then I have to wonder why you are even here. I doubt that you would have much difficulty in hunting down the operations of 8 Fingers yourself. I questioned, already trying to pin down the full reason for why she was here. It would take only a little bit of time and effort for me to do so. I ripped the knowledge from the minds of Eight Fingers leaders on where all their large-scale operations are. But after reading the minds of all of those despicable animals, I found that they all had one commonality to them. You. A few of her tails pointed at me to emphasize what she said. Me? How might I have ended up in the forefronts of the minds of Eight Fingers leadership? I already knew the answer. You, Princess Rena, the youngest and seemingly politically weakest of your family, managed to take on a kingdom-spanning criminal organization in a way that they all wanted you dead for one reason or another. You are also the only noble that actually has fully tried stopping them. Compare that to your peers who made half-hearted efforts, ignored them, or were even working for them, such as your eldest brother. I allowed myself to giggle as the goddess gave me a questioning tilt of her head. From the way that my elder brother, Barbaro, acted earlier when Alecto began naming nobles that he was aware of working for them, I had a suspicion. It grew when he swiftly undertook a mission, soon after, that would take him far away from the capital. You just ended up confirming it for me. The goddess found some amusement in this as she asked, "And you aren't that upset about your brother being part of a criminal organization?" I would withhold my true feelings about my family and instead give her a half-truth. My lady, I was never able to grow close with most of my family as I grew up. In my family, I was already a spare of spares. Barbaro was spoiled and cruel, with the most thought given to me is who he could sell me off to for an alliance in marriage. Zaynak always held me in contempt because he had suspicions on my true intelligence and saw me as a threat to attaining the throne. At most, he sees me as an ally of convenience. I was pleased to note that she had now gained a sympathetic expression as I spoke. Beyond altruistic, she's also highly empathetic, which made me wonder why that might be the case. Typically, those with vast amounts of power typically would not have a well-developed conscience for those lesser than themselves. This could imply that the Fox Princess was one of the rare few that deviated from that trend, or it meant that she wasn't always as powerful as she is now, giving her the ability to understand the weakness of lesser beings from an equalized perspective. Still, I decided to continue my explanation to her since obtaining the sympathy of a goddess could prove useful in this discussion that we were having. Both of my sisters had been married off before I could get to know them. Mother died giving birth to me. And father, while he loves me dearly just as I do him, his duties as king leave him with precious little time for us to spend together. I see. A lonely existence where everyone either wants to use you or kill you. And it's fair to assume that you didn't have a lot of friends growing up either? You would be correct in that assumption. I nodded in agreement. When I was a child, I learned quickly that most children attempting to befriend me were actually after something from me, be it the chance to obtain a proposal for me, getting close to father and my brothers, attaining wealth and power. They all wanted something, and I was little more than a pawn in their schemes. The servants would never dare try and establish a friendship with me. One of the few positives of my childhood was the development of my ability to read people to see if they planned to use me or not. I admitted this fairly easily as it allowed me to build further rapport with the goddess. The shifting of her posture as she subconsciously leaned towards me in her chair showed her growing interest in my story. In a way, this castle, this kingdom even, has been a sort of prison for me. It was worse before I finally met Clyme. I was in the royal carriage taking a tour around the city when I saw this orphaned boy in the streets. I couldn't help but feel nostalgic about the first meeting between my Clyme and I. Normally, we would just pass the homeless orphans by without a word, but then Clyme met my gaze with those innocent eyes of his, still untouched by the hardships that he went through. I can still perfectly recall every detail of those beautiful and innocent eyes that gazed on me like I was the only thing that mattered in the world. It gave me an indescribable feeling of power that I had never felt until that day. I no longer cared about any loneliness that I had ever felt as I found something even better than mere companionship. I had complete and utter devotion. I never wanted that feeling to disappear. I knew I had to permanently have my Clyme for myself in not just soul but body as well. Maintaining the love-struck demeanor of the Golden Princess, I continued, something in me knew that I had to help him, so I invited him into my carriage and took him back home to the palace. I fought to make sure he wouldn't be kicked out. I supplemented this by hugging myself and adopting the expression of a blushing maiden. It was only later that I realized it was love at first sight and I had fully given my heart to my handsome knight. That is adorable to hear, the Fox Princess said with a giddy excitement for me. Aside from a highly emotional personality, she's also a romantic. Have you discovered any methods that will allow you to be with Climb? I don't believe that she was trying to test my ability to plan, but considering how enthralled she was with my love life, telling her a few of my ideas would make her more attached to me. And it made her potentially likely to help me in them, considering that she was here for some form of aid from me. There were a few. One was that Climb and I would elope together. I then took on a tortured expression to endear the Fox Princess to me, but that idea is hard to stomach and makes me hesitant since I would be abandoning those who would need my help. I really couldn't care less about those people besides how their happiness made my Climb happy. But that wouldn't sound pleasant to the goddess, who I was almost completely positive that she didn't know anything of my true personality and just believed me to be an intelligent and kind-hearted princess. Another was to elevate Climb to the status of nobility in one way or another. This, in turn, would allow me to petition Father to allow our relationship. But it is a faint hope, as the other nobles would never accept a commoner turned noble being together with me. And they would have more than enough power to force Father to prevent it. I'm not ignorant in the waning influence of Father against the other nobles who would see him deposed. And yet, now, I was going to attempt to gain as much sympathy from this goddess as I could. To do so, I slouched my posture and bowed my head slightly, put my hands in my lap, and forced tears to drip from my eyes. It just seems so distant a dream for us to truly be together, especially with Father's declining health. I fear that once either of my elder brothers attains the throne, then I will be bartered away in a marriage with Climb taken away from me. I added some sniffling to enhance the act. I watched as a pair of hands with long, and wickedly sharp, nails, reached over and gently took my hands in their own to comfort me. My eyes also glanced at the 10 unique rings of unparalleled craftsmanship that covered each of the hand's fingers. Slowly, I looked up to see that the Fox Princess now had a maternal expression of concern. Externally, I looked surprised at the goddess' action. But internally, I was pleased to see that my emotional manipulation had worked. "Please, don't cry, Renna." As she said this, 2 of her tails gently wiped the tears from my eyes. "What if I told you that your dream of being together with Climb could be made a reality? That I would do whatever was asked of me in order to have it? Why you could truly do that for us?" I asked while making myself sound shocked, like I hadn't partially expected this by steering our conversation the way I did. The Fox Princess nodded with a wide smile on her face. "Not only that. I think that you and Climb would look very cute sitting on a nearby throne together." I found my mind going blank for a moment, as any plan I had for what I thought the Fox Princess might do was currently upended. I surmised, and had proven true, that the goddess was going to enlist my aid in dealing with 8 fingers along with helping to spread worship of herself. In return, she would probably, now it was confirmed that she would, help me be with my Climb. At most, she'd likely try to rule these lands with me helping her in what ways I could. Never could I have expected that she wanted to make me queen of the Riestais. "Are you saying that you want me to be the queen of this kingdom?" "Absolutely," she said without a hint of falsehood. "Based upon all the memories I needed to sort through of the former leaders of 8 Fingers, I learned quite a lot about the politics of this kingdom. For instance, your father, while not the worst king in history, is so ineffectual that his vassals have become too powerful for him to control. Your brother, Barbaro, is a spoiled idiot who doesn't think things through, and is so corruptible that he's been in business dealings with Hilma Signeus for years now. He'll run the country into the ground. As for Zaynak, while much smarter than Barbaro, will care more for the nobles than he will the commoners, which, while greater than Barbaro, is still not enough. With all the tenuous alliances he has, he's liable to get assassinated within a few years and someone worse will take his place." The Fox Princess then, surprisingly, cupped my cheek and looked at me with a kind smile. "But you, Renna. You're smart enough to see the problems of this kingdom and work on fixing them, even with the limited political power and resources you've had. You care about the common people, and have tried to help them on numerous occasions, even going so far as to perform manual labor that most of these nobles wouldn't be caught dead doing. If you can do all of that with only a limited amount of resources, I wonder what you might accomplish with all of them. With all the resources of the kingdom? I could make certain that nothing could ever come between my climb and I. He would be with me forever. And speaking of forever, as a goddess, I think that the Fox Princess might be able to make that a possibility. Considering the proposal even further, even if I would be forced to continue my charade as the Golden Princesses, I would have everything that I have ever wanted. I will admit, the Golden Queen does have a nice ring to it. And, in public, I'd have my Golden King at my side. Privately, I'd have my golden pet under me or inside me. That made me excited. With a regal tone, making it appear like I would bear this future rulership as a solemn duty, I answered, I will accept the crown of rulership if it means that Climb and our people will prosper with happy lives. From the slight quickening of her breathing, the slight dilation of her slitted pupils, and the wagging of all her tails, the Fox Princess was very happy about my answer. And I will help ensure that you will sit on your throne, Queen Rena. Oh, I very much like the way that title sounds with my name. Even more when my Climb would call me it amidst the throes of pleasure. But, my lady? If it's not too much to ask, do you have a name beyond the title of the Fox Princess? If we were going to be working together for the start of our very long partnership, it would be nice to know what my new goddess' true name was. The goddess giggled in humor before nodding. My name is Kasha Blanc, daughter of the goddess, Inori. It's a pleasure to be working with you. As Kasha said this, I smiled back to her, an amalgam of my true and false personalities, more than just work for you, Kasha. You are my goddess now, and I, Queen Rena, am your devout worshipper henceforth, I said without any lie. She was giving me everything already, so what more might she give me if I were to fully worship her? It's funny. Earlier, I contemplated that I needed father to live for at least 2 more years. Now, it didn't matter if he dropped dead right this moment. I didn't need him anymore. Kasha continued smiling as I witnessed a gold chalice manifest in her hand with water. Then, I watched her hold one hand over the water and cut her palm open with the nail of her index finger. With fascination, I watched as glowing golden blood dripped from her hand into the water of the chalice, mixing with it before the water turned a glowing gold as well. My followers started this ritual of consuming my blood, which gave them all strength. I won't force you to do it if you don't want to. I didn't let her finish as I gently took the chalice into both of my hands. More gifts? Then I would take them gladly. I already made my choice the moment you promised me a life with Climb. I answered, which earned me an accepting look from Kasha as she let go of the chalice. I would burn the world to ash if someone promised me that I'd have my Climb with me forever. Drinking Kasha's blood was nothing. With that last thought, I raised the chalice to my lips and quickly consumed every last drop of golden water within, rooting out the troubles. Zarasu. Day 30. As Kasha and I stepped through the gate that she had conjured, I still couldn't get over the slight disorientation that washed over me from being at Haven Lake one moment, and at the Great Lake of Tob the next. As my feet became submerged in the shallow water of this section of the lake, I looked over to see Kasha join me as her boots splashed into the water. The goddess looked up at me before asking, "So, you feeling confident about your first mission in diplomacy?" This was followed by a good-natured smile filling her face. One thing of interest that I've noticed since last seeing the real Kasha, not the copy that typically runs the day-to-day of the village, is how her eyes have changed. Before, her eyes had looked quite human, even with the unique orange eye color that they had. But now, they seem to have permanently changed to be a glowing golden with slitted pupils, just like her copy. One of the few reasons I could still tell the two apart from one another is the differing personality traits that each had. I haven't had the chance to ask why this was the case, and I didn't know if said question might offend her. About as confident as I'll ever be. In the years since the war between the tribes, none have made an attempt to unite all the tribes under one banner, as the scarcity of food made such long-term alliances too volatile. I answered with reasonable worry. Kasha patted me on the back in reassurance, then you'll become the first to do so. Besides, you do have me accompanying you, so that gives an added advantage in these talks. I gave the kitsune a teasing grin in response. I hope that whatever added advantages you end up giving me doesn't involve holding a bunch of children or, gods forbid, the adults of the Red Eye by your tails. Kasha gave me a mock look of shock, but it was only one time. Besides, I'll have you know that I haven't terrorized any children for some time now. Raising my brow to her, I gave Kasha an accusing look. After a few moments, she finally faltered, "Okay, maybe I have snuck up on my daughter a few times to spook her." That reply took me by surprise. "She has a daughter? Kasha, I didn't realize that you were a mother," I remarked aloud. A large smile grew on her face. "Yup. Even if I've only recently adopted them, I absolutely love my two girls," Kasha admitted proudly. "I see. What made you adopt them?" I asked curiously. As I said this, I looked further ahead of us and saw the village of the Red-Eye tribe, which was less than 100 yards from our slowly approaching position. Its mixture of mud and wooden walls were quite impressive, as our tribe didn't have such an advanced defense. But between the wooden posts of the walls, I noticed multiple lizard men moving within the village, likely in reaction to us. With luck, the Red-Eye tribe would be reasonable and not attack us without hearing what we had to say. It also helped that I had the mark of the traveler upon my chest, which gave me some leeway in moving about the tribes without immediate hostility. At least, it usually did. It started with me originally mentoring my youngest daughter, Nina, in magic almost a month back. But then, I found out that her sister, Tyre, needed help, so I rescued her. Following that, as time went on and we got closer, I instinctually saw them as my daughters. They found out and agreed that they saw me as their mother. It's nice to hear of a family finding each other so quickly. I congratulated. I assumed that they're aware of your species and divinity. Correct on all accounts. I didn't even tell them, since they managed to figure it out by themselves. Kasha answered. Smart kids, I remarked, which Kasha did nothing to refute. It wasn't much longer before the two of us had arrived at the gates of the village, where I could see a few of the Red-Eye tribe waiting outside with their spears in hand, but not pointed at us. A few moments later the gates to the village opened and an elderly lizard man slowly hobbled his way out to us on a cane, while a few others helped him walk. To be honest, I was quite impressed at the lizard man's advanced age. Even though the Green Claw tribe had a few elderly members, we were more of the outliers, as not every tribe could afford to take care of their elders. That was in addition to surviving the conflicts our tribes went through. Greetings, traveler and stranger. What business might you have with the Red-Eye tribe to appear before us as you have? The elder lizard man hailed calmly. Greetings, elder, I said with a nod of respect. I am the traveler, Zarasu Shasha. With me is my friend and ally, Kasha Blanc. We wished to speak with the chief of the Red-Eye tribe about a beneficial proposal of alliance. The elder gave me a nod of understanding. If this is the case, then we shall escort you to the one who leads us and let them decide. I gave another respectful nod. Thank you, elder. I gave a look to Kasha, and the pair of us came to an unspoken agreement before walking together through the gates and onto the wooden platform rising out of the water on stilts. We slowly followed behind the elder and his escort as they took us across the village. All the while, members of the Red-Eye looked at us with curiosity or suspicion. Yet, most of this attention was directed at Kasha due to her unique species. While they've likely heard of or seen the rare traveling human before, they've never seen what appeared to be a human with the ears and 9 tails of a fox. Compared to her, I looked normal. Not the most cheery bunch, are they? Kasha asked quietly. I understood what she meant, as I felt that there was a dourness among this tribe. The only question was what must have caused it. I feel it, too. We could probably ask their chief about it. Perhaps try to aid them with whatever is causing it, since that could help to smooth over talks. I responded back. It was only a little longer before the elder stopped before a hut, slightly larger than the others. He then turned to us. The one who leads us waits within. With another shared look, Kasha and I went inside to begin our meeting. The moment I stepped inside, I found myself frozen in place as I looked upon an image of absolute beauty. Smooth white scales, the color of the purest snow. It was only interrupted by the light red, almost pink, markings that wrapped around her neck, torso, and limbs. This didn't tarnish the beauty of her scales, it only enhanced them. Her eyes gleamed like rubies in the darkness of the hut, almost making me lose myself within the inquisitive intelligence hidden within. A necklace of jewels wrapped around her neck, adding further color to her body as an orange shawl traced in yellow patterns rested across her shoulders. Greetings, visitors. My name is Crush Lulu and I am acting chieftain of the Red-Eye tribe, Crush said, her voice like a song that I felt ended too early. Hello, Crush. My name is Kasha Blanc. It's a pleasure to meet you, Kasha said, though her voice seemed almost like background noise as I continued to gaze upon perfection that seemed to have been perfectly crafted by the gods. Her tail moved slightly, like a charmed serpent, as I noticed her expression become one of slight sadness. Yet, why should the epitome of beauty ever be sad? I see, even the bearer of frost pain, one of the 4 great treasures, looks upon my bizarre body with disgust, Crush said with a trained acceptance before I felt myself walk towards her without thought in my actions. Crush's ruby eyes gazed at me with confusion. What are you doing? Is something the matter? In what was possibly moments, but felt like an eternity to me, I found myself sitting on my knees in front of the beautiful woman before me. Then, without any conscious choice, a high-pitched mating cry erupted from my throat. I found myself absolutely mortified as I saw Crush's hands cover her mouth in shock. Then, I heard Kasha giggling behind me, but I ignored it as I gazed at those ruby eyes. Please excuse me for any offense I may have given, I said in apology as I felt my tail shoot up straight into the air in the beginnings of a courting ceremony. This was embarrassing beyond measure, yet, at the same time, I noticed that Crush's snowy tail matched mine like a mirror. Did I just doom these talks before they even started? Or did Crush feel what I did as well? It is fine, Zarasu of the Green Claw. As acting chief of the Red Eye, such an outburst does not offend me, Crush said. She knows my name? Actually, of course she would know my name, considering that I bear frost pain. But, she knew my name. It was. Both of you have come to my village today, Crush said, nodding to both me and Kasha, who now sat next to me. How did I not notice her do that? But I'm not fully certain as to what your goal for visiting today is. Marry me, I blurted out with complete sincerity. I think that Kasha might have been snickering at me, but all of my focus was on the shocked expression of the snow-white beauty in front of me as she looked at me, almost frozen like a painted image. What? Marry you? Crush said as the weight of my words finally caught up to her. She quickly covered her mouth with a gasp and a slight redness covered the scales over her snout. At the same time, I finally understood what I had asked and became embarrassed once more. What we arrived here to ask was if your tribe would be open to joining Kasha's alliance. I explained quickly, before adding, but I am serious about my proposal to you. Why, you must be joking, right? Crush asked as her tail wagged back and forth in the air, an action I unconsciously matched with my own. We have only just met. Yet, I cannot deny falling in love with you as soon as my eyes set upon your form. I admitted as my heart quickened. But feel free to answer at a later date when we get to know one another better. I added, trying to avoid foisting such a heavy request upon her until she felt ready for it. Know each other? Crush asked almost without thought, yet I found my voice had all but left me in that moment, leaving me frozen, like the ice from frost pain. It's just that I find it surprising that you don't find revulsion or disgust when looking at my body like others might. You see, once in a while, an albino like myself is born into the Red-Eye tribe with an aptitude for a talent. It is part of the reason that albinos can become the second in command of the tribe. For instance, my talent gives me an aptitude for priestly abilities. That's interesting, Crush. Has it always been albinos that have been born with talents, or do all children born from albinos have talents? Kasha asked with curiosity, making Crush ponder the question. From what I can recall correctly, the children of albino lizard men born without the trait have a 50% chance of inheriting a talent, while those born with albinism always have a talent. It just doesn't happen that often since most lizard men view albinos with some disgust. Crush answered, "Your scales are the beautiful color of freshly fallen snow on the peaks of mountains." I interjected. Crush's tail smacked against the reed-covered floor of the hut. "Beautiful?" she asked nervously. "Without question," I answered. "But we should get back on topic about our offer," I said quickly after, "as I'm sure you've noticed, a massive stone tree stands in the Great Lake of Tob." Crush nodded in agreement. We witnessed it rise from the lake, yet we didn't send anyone to scout as we were uncertain as to what might happen were we to send any of our people to investigate. She explained. "Then to explain it, I must tell you of a goddess that came to the Green Claw tribe and offered us aid so that we wouldn't need to worry about food or attacks. In an effort to prove her ability, she created the massive stone tree within a few minutes." I summarized. "An actual goddess visited you and did this? That just seems so impossible," Crush said with a tone of slight disbelief. She wasn't wrong about how impossible this seemed. For the past few weeks, I've been witness to everything I had once thought impossible be made possible. Honestly, that feat wasn't really difficult for me to accomplish. Kasha casually admitted next to me, "If you want difficult, try organizing an ever-expanding village of multiple races while also preventing a nearby human city from discovering it." Crush's ruby eyes widened as they turned to look at Kasha. "Why you're saying that?" "I am a goddess who conjured that tree, yes," Kasha said with a friendly smile. "I'm also here to help you and your tribe, if you're open to accepting my aid." Crush began to breathe quickly as she heard this before attempting to regain her composure and calm herself. "By aid, Miss Kasha, what would you want in return? And this is if I fully believe your claims. If you truly need aid, then I am willing to give it to you at no cost." Kasha answered with a smile, "I'd be overjoyed if you and your people were willing to join my settlement like the Green Claw, but if not, then it is no bother to me." "If my people and I weren't open to joining your settlement, why help us? What is it that you gain from helping us?" Crush asked with reasonable suspicion. "Knowledge in the fact that there is one less group suffering in the world. From what I've been told by Zarasu of the problems that not just the Green Claw tribe, but that all the Lizard Man tribes have faced is constant famine and starvation." I decided to add to Kasha's words with my own after she said this. "Crush, before I met Kasha, I was attempting to test out an innovation that I discovered while traveling outside the lake and forest called a fishery before another famine occurred. This innovation was to create a sustainable method to harvest fish, yet it would take some time before the efforts of my labor bore fruit. Thankfully, Kasha arrived and was willing to both give me the resources to greatly expand this operation and feed my people in the meantime." Saying this, I pulled a small fish from my satchel, about 4 inches long. I noticed Crush's ruby eyes quickly flipped to the fish in my hands with a hungry look. A look I was very familiar with during my life in the Green Claw. "Kasha, would you?" I asked. One of her golden tails snaked over to me until its tip hovered above the fish. Then, a circular array of magic appeared over the fish and we watched as the small fish grew to a massive proportion of 4 feet. I watched as Crush's jaw dropped at the feat of magic. "Is that permanent?" she asked with amazement. "Yes. Additionally, I can provide the red-eye with salt to preserve your food if requested." As Kasha said this, a small pillar of salt grew a foot in front of where Crush was sitting. The beautiful snow-scaled woman hesitantly picked up the small salt pillar and gained a thoughtful twinkle in her eyes. It was pleasing to note that Crush was considering this as her tail slowly moved back and forth behind her. During the warring times, the Red-Eye was the only tribe that abstained from the final battle. Then, Crush's tail stopped moving and she set the salt pillar down as her expression hardened. We had lost all taste for fighting and starved rather than kill our own kind. I remember that your tribe didn't take part. But how did your tribe survive without any food? Was it in part because of your priestly abilities? I asked curiously. No. Instead, our chief arrived to us after being gone for a few hours with fresh meat. At the time, none of us knew where he attained that meat, but we did have a suspicion. Yet, we were all too hungry to care. It always happened after a family was expelled from the village. A look of shame crossed Crush's face as I also suspected what it was that she spoke of. Cannibalism? I asked. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that Kasha had stiffened upon hearing this. We pretended that we didn't know what it was as another family would be expelled, and the chief would come back with more meat. Crush admitted, eventually, this came to a head as we couldn't ignore what we all knew, so we mutinied against the chief under my banner as I was the second in command. Even with our greater numbers, the chief didn't back down to the very end. When I struck the final blow against him, instead of rage and anger, he gave me a smile of warmth and happiness, and I understood what he had done. I tried to think of what reason would make the former chief of the Red Eye so happy. And what was it that he did? I asked as I couldn't fit the pieces together just yet. Our tribe was brought closer together after the conflict, and our heavily shrunken numbers made it so that food was not the issue that it once was. She answered and I finally understood. He performed the most hated actions in order to villainize himself so that you wouldn't suffer the guilt of what you'd all done. He saved your tribe at the most extreme cost. I summarized. Crush's ruby eyes looked to the floor as she nodded her head. Yes. He made himself into the villain to protect us all. And even though I despise the actions he was forced to take, I respect why he did it and find myself unable to hate him. Yet, I still wonder if there may have been another way. I gave Crush a nod of understanding. None of us mortals are omniscient or omnipotent when faced against such choices. If the Green Claw had been put in the same situation as your tribe, we may have done exactly the same as you. We can't change the past, but we can take what we learn from our prior failures and regrets to make a better future, I consoled, which made Crush raise her head to me. And yet, I still live with the disgrace of what we all did. Crush replied with self-loathing evident in her tone. I do not see a disgraceful woman before me. I see a beautiful soul leading her tribe away from their past actions. I retorted to dispel her self-deprecating words. Crush gasped at what I said before she blushed and smiled. I thank you for your compliments. You have a way with words, she said, making me smile as my tail softly moved back and forth in appreciation. Crush, Kasha began, trust me when I say that I've seen some of the most unspeakable actions in my life, especially so in desperation. Quite a few of the ones who performed said acts didn't think twice about what they did. The fact that you and your tribe hold regret and wish to be better already puts you as immeasurably greater than others. The white-scaled lizard man seemed surprised at the goddess' words, but also appreciative. But what Kasha said next was something I found unexpected. Besides, one of the most horrible ways to test the limits of someone's desperation is to make them starve. I know what it's like to live off of less than the bare minimum needed to survive. The constant pain of an empty stomach that makes you so desperate to relieve that you'll eat dirt and mud just to make it go away. The way you can both see and feel yourself wasting away as the body eats itself to persist a little longer. The dark look in Kasha's eyes told me exactly how acquainted she was with starvation. It made me wonder what must have forced a goddess to endure such a harrowing experience. I won't judge others when they are forced to endure such pain. It also makes me more than willing to help prevent others from having to experience it. Crush seemed to look at Kasha with what almost seemed like a sense of kinship. You went through such hardship as well? Crush asked. Yes, I did. Back when I was younger and a lot less powerful. It seems that mortals and gods can face similar hardships to one another. Thank you for telling me this, Crush said in appreciation. Zarasu, as it was said earlier that the Green Claw lives in a settlement created by Kasha, what could you tell me about it from your personal experience? It is called Haven Lake. It originally was only inhabited by goblins and hobgoblins until it gained ogres and trolls. Then, humans and elves arrived, followed by the Green Claw tribe, and then Kitsune, which are Kasha's people. It doesn't have any discrimination against races, and it's steadily growing as more people join. Because there isn't an innate worry of safety with the walls and protectors guarding it, or food while Kasha helps to bolster our supplies, we're able to focus on growing our own. Since joining, the Green Claw hasn't needed to focus on surviving and can now look towards the growth of our people. I explained to help convince the beautiful woman before me. What about leadership? While Kasha is in charge overall, there is a council formed from leaders of the multiple different groups in Haven Lake that help decide policy. Kasha doesn't usually disagree with the council's decisions unless it might be bad for Haven Lake's long-term health. As I said this, a look of interest grew in Crush's ruby eyes. Would it be possible for me to see Haven Lake for myself before I made any decision? Crush asked. The prospect of it does sound tempting, but I have to confirm it beforehand. That's more than fair, Crush. I replied with a smile. Princess Rena. Sitting behind my desk in my study, I watched as my newest maid opened the door to my study and let in my latest guests. She was a very beautiful woman who fit into the dress of her uniform teasingly well. She stood 3 inches taller than me, boosted another inch with her shoes. On the topic of her uniform, it appeared just like any of the other maids within the castle. Yet, there were a few customized touches to it that were expertly hidden on it, such as the hooks on the inside of the skirt going down the side of her right leg that could easily be undone to provide more freedom of movement for her leg. Another was a small flap at the back of her dress at the tailbone which was hidden under the bow tying her apron. My maid had a heart-shaped face filled with beautiful features and a pair of intelligent red eyes hidden behind a pair of gold spectacles. She had long pink hair done up into a braided bun with her side bangs freely going down to her chest. This maid was known as Susanna Sora by the rest of the castle, a beautiful human woman that I had hired recently as my personal maid and assistant. In truth, her name was Sanami, a kitsune that Kasha had left to protect me from any future threats that were likely to come for me the further my bid for the throne went. Sanami had been ordered by Kasha to protect me and follow all of my commands. It was very interesting to be in command of a being that Kasha said was more powerful than adamantite plate adventurers. Upon first meeting Sanami, I was almost instantly able to recognize a few things about her. She was absolutely romantically infatuated with the goddess, obsessed even. And this was just my first observation from watching all her body language and reactions to what Kasha did. That was only the simple facet of her personality. It was when our eyes met that I fully understood. Sanami was just like me and she knew that I was just like her. And yet, we both knew that Kasha didn't have a single clue about either of us. That was an interesting conversation the pair of us had after Kasha had left. Rena, Sanami said with a knowing grin that was visible behind a translucent pink. Sanami, I said with the rare smile of my true personality towards another living being. I watched as the pink-haired woman slowly walked up to me. At the time, before she began wearing her maid uniform, she had arrived wearing a suspiciously similar outfit to Kasha's, minus the hat. Yet, the skirt was much shorter, the dress was more revealing, and it was all colored a pink darker than her hair. I feel we shouldn't mince words, Rena, one who was gifted a cup of my beautiful Kasha's blood to drink. Even with the ring you wear to hide the proof of my Kasha's gift, I can still see the overflowing devotion in your eyes. Some of it is towards my Kasha, but the rest is to another, she said while stroking my cheek. Who is it that dominates your devotion so readily? For once, I felt no fear of reprisal from being perfectly honest with the pink kitsune, as I knew that she would never tell another soul, just as she knew that I wouldn't either. We both were at a standoff which I found exciting instead of worrying. My climb. He is the one that I want to own in body, mind, and soul. And I will have it. I gave Sanami a look of amusement, but I find it interesting that you refer to your princess as my Kasha. I answered with a musing of my own. That's because she is my Kasha. She is beautiful and perfect in every way imaginable. I love her mother, Inori, but when my beautiful princess summoned me into this realm and I laid my eyes on her, I knew that she was the one destined to be my mate. Sanami then gave a huff of disappointment, yet, she has currently chosen a human as her mate. And what do you plan to do about it? I asked, a little intrigued. Sanami gave me an amused look before laughing. I hope you don't think I plan to kill the man, do you? I could never upset my beautiful Kasha like that. Instead, I'll just wait. She answered with a smug smile. I rose a questioning eyebrow at this. You'll just wait? Why would that be? I asked. You humans have extraordinarily short lives. In but the blink of an eye, you'll die after a mere century or so. And while there are methods of achieving immortality, I'm very certain that her human mate could be convinced to not use them. And even if that wasn't the case, I can just watch and wait since no one is perfect, least of all the mate my Kasha has chosen. One day, he'll screw up and hurt my Kasha. On that day, I'll be there to comfort her and give her all the love she could ever want. At Sanami's mention of immortality, I became incredibly interested, something that she took notice of. With a smile, the pink kitsune leaned close to me. Oh, something I said which my mistress has taken interest in. You already know. I answered, there's a method that would allow me to be with my climb forever. Sanami rested both of her arms around my shoulder like a lover might, quite a few, inquisitive queen to be. She answered before a wide grin split her face, but a lot of them are so boring. No, the best method is to become a kitsune. You get an immortal lifespan, stronger with age, Inori blessed looks, more pleasure in all the right ways. Sanami looked thoughtful for a moment before saying, possibly using, wish upon a star, could do it, but that has risks. Some impossibly rare items not of this realm could be used, but you might die of old age before getting a whiff of their locations. Finally, Lady Inori, and eventually my Kasha once she becomes strong enough, can simply transform you without issue. But, as goddesses, that requires one specific thing to be done by mortals beforehand. Worship. I finished, receiving a nod from Sanami. What a unique idea, completely abandoning my humanity and obtaining immortality with my climb. The only trade-off being that I needed to spread worship of Kasha and her mother. Yet, such an endeavor wasn't that difficult to perform. I already had an entire operation in place to aid the commoners which did wonders for the public's perception of me. Readjusting some of my charity works or creating some new ones, all under the name of the Fox Princess, would rapidly gain her goodwill and worship if done correctly. For instance, aside from Reestize, I originally only needed to open up a charity in Rebloomrusha, Rebulura, and Pespel to have knowledge of my altruism spread across the entire kingdom at a quick enough pace due to the operations being spread between the cities and towns. From there, the goodwill from the people allowed me to convince Father to increase his aid to me, eventually allowing me to spread a charity in each of the cities. Once completed, it was simple work in making the charities self-sustaining before I let them run by themselves, all the while collecting the goodwill of the people due to my name being attached to them. Creating a new charity in the Fox Princess's name is easy. What would take more work is handling the church, as they would take immediate issue in a new religion spreading. But one convenient aspect about the Church of the Four Great Gods is that the head priests of the church were all located within the city's grand temple. That made it much easier to deal with them in one fell swoop. But this also meant that I could strike the heads of the church in one fell swoop. But that would take some planning to pull off. Killing all of them was one option. It would certainly cause a measure of chaos in the church, as all of their priests and such would be focused on reorganizing their leadership or investigating the cause of their deaths. But that was only a stopgap at best. The chaos would subside within a month or two, and they'd likely retaliate against the only suspect at hand, the newly growing Order of the Fox Princess. Too many issues would come from that. No, the best method to weaken the strength of the church was to attack their legitimacy. Break the faith of the church, and all of their followers would leave in droves. And what better way of breaking faith than to show its preachers being corrupt with evidence, fabricated or otherwise? Already assembling a plan to help our goddess? Sanami asked. Of course. I'll just need some time to iron out the details and assemble the pieces together. The faster I do so, the faster that my goddess gets empowered and I get to be with my climb forever. I answered. Wonderful. As I watched Susanna stand aside at the door with her head bowed, I couldn't help but find some amusement at the role she was playing. A powerful kitsune that could slaughter this entire castle, and she was acting like a simple submissive maid. There was no doubt that she found this role amusing as well. It was a game to her, and Sanami enjoyed every minute of it. The first to step through the doorway was my climb, leading the adventuring group Blue Roses after him. While I had seen the group from a distance, I had never personally interacted with them before. Yet, I had read up enough about each of the women to get a good picture of them. The first to step in was the group's leader, Lakehue's Alvain Dale Aindra. Some would call her quite beautiful, with long blonde hair, bright green eyes, a lovely face and figure in an expensive pink dress. An outfit one would wear when meeting with those of a higher class, not when adventuring. It appears Lakehue's prefers courtly decorum unlike her teammates. From what I know of Lakehue's history, she was a noble woman that readily took to the life of an adventurer. During this, she had attained one of the swords of darkness called Kilonerum, the demonic sword. Shame that I didn't get to see it up close today. Then again, from the other bits of information I've learned about her, she has to constantly mentally battle the sword into submission to prevent it from possessing her. Perhaps it was a good idea that she left the blade behind in this meeting. It wouldn't do for Sanami to execute my future employee when we've only just met. The next, most noticeable, member of their group was the extremely muscled and tall blonde woman in heavy crimson plate. Her name was Gagran. I didn't need to have intelligence or the ability to read people to know a boisterous and talkative personality when I saw it. Her blue eyes scanned the room with interest, though I had to hide my scowl of anger as her eyes lingered on my climb for too long. Hopefully, she doesn't do anything that would require me to permanently fix. Following Gagran were a pair of identical twins. Both women had hazel, almost orange, eyes with their blonde hair held up into ponytails. The pair both wore orange scarves and trousers, dark leather breastplates, and mesh underneath it all. Both were almost impossible to tell apart if not for the blue on the scarf and pants of one and the red on the other. They were named Tina and Tia, and from what I knew of them, they were former assassins turned adventurers. From what I could tell of their body language, both were quickly observing the room for traps, enemies, and escapes. Additionally, it was exceedingly easy to tell that both had already come up with numerous plans on how to kill me, my climb, and Sanami if it came to it. Yet, from the way it seemed, they weren't even planning my death intentionally, just as an ingrained habit. Perhaps I might have some use of them for specific jobs that could be accomplished at a later time. At least, if I could get the rest of Blue Roses on board, since it was easy to tell their loyalty. After all, they could probably earn more money by taking assassination missions rather than adventuring jobs. Yet, they remained in Blue Roses instead. That meant something greater than money tied them to the group. Finally, the last of their members stepped in. She was a woman of short stature that was completely encased within a crimson cloak while her face was covered in a white mask with a few black decorative lines. The only visible part of the woman was her long blonde hair that fell from her hood. This was the most mysterious member of the group, Evil Eye. It was incredibly difficult to find anything on the elusive woman. All I know is that she's a powerful mage. Oddly enough, instead of studying me or my study, her attention seemed to hover on Suzanne for a few moments before Evil Eye finally followed after the rest of her companions. Putting on the expression of a star-struck princess, I spoke, Blue Roses, it's such a pleasure to finally meet all of you. The same could be said of you, Your Highness. Lakehue's replied with a respectful curtsy. We never would have expected to personally be requested by the Golden Princess herself. Regardless, I'm honored that great heroes like yourselves took the time to hear my humble request. For that, I thank you all, I said like a shy princess before her idols. I was happy to note that Lakes and Gagron looked at ease, yet the twins and Evil Eye still seemed unreadable. That's quite the praise to be given by royalty. Thanks, Your Highness, Gagron said with a wide grin. If I may be so bold to ask, how might Blue Roses be able to help you? I assume that what you need from us doesn't fall in the realm of a normal job. Evil Eye surprisingly spoke up and asked. It appears that she's the more inquisitive one of the bunch. You are correct to assume that this urgent request of mine doesn't fall into the normal realm of typical jobs. I answered, but before I tell you, I must request that you keep what is heard to yourselves. This caused a weighted seriousness to fall on the room. Not a word of what you say shall be heard by any outside this room, Your Highness. That is something we can promise. Lakes answered for the group. Thank you, I said with an audible relief. 2 days ago, it was discovered that Father's cousin, Alecto, was the leader of 8 Fingers and that the rest of their organization's leadership was dead or horrifically punished. That statement surprised all of the women as I noticed that even Evil Eye flinched at hearing this. How did this happen, Your Highness? We've been on the trail of 8 Fingers for months now, yet we still were unable to get near their leadership. Lakes asked. I make no jest when I say that it was actual divine intervention. An actual goddess called the Fox Princess sent Alecto through a portal of magic into Father's throne room. He had been cursed to speak of everything he knew of 8 Fingers. This was in addition to him being merged into a parody of a golden throne with a crown bound to his head. I was pleased to note how this had captured their interests, especially Evil Eye's. An actual goddess did this? Gagron asked aloud. I felt my thumb absent-mindedly rub the golden ring on my right index finger as I thought about my goddess. Yes. The Fox Princess struck down the entire leadership in one fell swoop. What's more, when the mage that Father sent for to dispel the enchantment on Alecto attempted it, he was unable to do so and said that it was on a level that he didn't know possible. But even with some doubts on whether Alecto's enchanted words were lies or not, some of it was proven true when a few of 8 Fingers' operations were discovered within the city on Cousin's word. As I said this, I could see the many thoughts going through the minds of the 5 women. If this is the case, then what is it that you need from us, Your Highness? It appears that much of the issue with 8 Fingers has already been sorted by this new goddess or will be by the king. Lakes questioned. Therein lies the issue. While Father and the other nobles have learned of the location of multiple operations of 8 Fingers, it is tempered by the continued disbelief of the other nobles and the mire of disagreements on how to act. In that time, what remains of 8 Fingers will have time to reorganize and go into hiding where they can continue to harm the innocent people of the Re-Estize kingdom. I put on the appearance of a princess with conviction and added, while the other nobles might argue over what should be done, I can't sit and wait for action. I have to protect my people. It doesn't matter if they are noble or commoner, as I care about ensuring that all of my people can live without the fear of the 8 Fingers guillotine hanging over their heads. Then, I took on the appearance of a girl who was slightly nervous. I want to do so much for everyone, but I need help to make it happen. Through the face of desperation I presented, I felt the warmth of satisfaction as the reactions of Blue Roses became sympathetic towards my plight. Then again, it was a given that they would accept my request beyond just the money. Blue Roses was known for hunting down 8 Fingers, which made convincing them with my endorsement all the easier. What I really wanted was to spread the news that I was the one to immediately take action against 8 Fingers while the rest of the nobles sat around and delayed any response. This would help to launch the idea of my competence in the minds of the public, both commoner and noble. That, in turn, helped to establish a legitimacy in comparison to my brothers before I finally took my throne. From there, I would rule the Re-Estize kingdom as its eternal queen, maiden of my goddess, Cassia Blanc. It's odd to think about. Before I drank Cassia's blood and became her maiden, the only person I cared about in this entire world was my climb. Yet, after I received that vision of the great white tree with Cassia and what she could become in combination with the pure raw connection I felt with her, this mindset of mine had slightly changed. Don't misunderstand, nothing could ever be more important than my climb and how I felt about him. But before, I felt absolutely nothing for anyone else. Even my family was nothing more than people who shared a name and blood with me, with father taking some slight importance due to his position and what it could give me. Now, I felt something for another person besides my climb. It was a strange warmth. Was it affection? Adoration? Love? I know that it was nowhere close to what I felt for my climb, but it was the first time I felt something for another being. It instantly put her above all of my family, as they meant nothing in comparison to her. Would this make her the equivalent of familial love, such as a mother, since she was greater than father? I know that it is not romantic, as my climb will be the only person to ever receive it. But I just don't understand what I felt fully. Until I have fully understood what it is that I'm feeling, I shall assume that it is familial until proven otherwise. After all, since I felt nothing for father, then it must be familial. Though it still feels odd to contemplate an emotional connection to anyone other than my climb. On another matter involving my consumption of Kasha's blood is my new status as one of her maidens. From what I was told, they are some of the rare few who consumed Kasha's blood and attained a higher connection with her compared to others, which was represented by glowing golden rings that manifested in one's eyes. It was after this happened that my sight had changed. When I saw Kasha after the imbibing, I saw golden motes of energy that floated around and into her. The greatest concentration of which was around her 9 tails. Yet, oddly enough, there was also a large concentration of these motes that gathered on another, unseen, limb that I watched slowly get larger. Like a phantasmal tail. It was fascinating to watch. Your Highness, Lakes began, we would be honored to aid you in subjugating 8 Fingers. They have been an organization that we've been hunting for some time now, and they need to be removed if Rias dies and her people are to prosper. Gagran gave a short laugh and patted her massive war pick. If you have knowledge of their locations, then I'm excited to hunt down these rats. It's been so frustrating tracking down 8 Fingers because they constantly hide from us like cowards. I'm in agreement. A few surgical strikes against 8 Fingers before they know of what happened to their leadership would help to break them into a disorganized mess that would be all the easier to pick apart. Evil Eye remarked with sound logic. I put on a grateful expression for the group. Know that I won't leave this duty to the kingdom unrewarded. You will all receive 40 gold each for the services being rendered. That perked all 5 of the adventurers up. That is a very generous reward, Your Highness. Lakes remarked. I see this reward as not being generous enough, I replied. This emotional mummery was more for my climb's sake than for Blue Rose's, though it did aid in endearing me to them. If I had more gold to give to all of you, then I would. I see the aid and protection of my people as priceless. For now, all I can give you is this humble reward in addition to my eternal gratitude. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Tsunami smirking in amusement, unseen to everyone else. For her, this was like watching an entertaining play, with the actors all perfectly playing their parts. Then we will make certain to not let you down, Your Highness. What is it that you would have us do? Lakes asked. I nodded and signaled for the adamantite plates to come to my desk before I pulled out a rolled-up piece of parchment from a drawer in my desk. I swiftly unrolled the parchment and placed a few books at the edges to keep it in place. On it was a map of the kingdom with markings written on it that pointed out locations that 8 Fingers was currently operating from, along with minor details as to what was being done. My map was exceedingly more detailed than the information that father had currently obtained from Alecto. Like idiots, he and the other nobles were taking too long to question Alecto, and he only had information on the aspects of the organization that he was aware of. In comparison, Kasha had obtained the knowledge from all the leaders of 8 Fingers and put it down on this map and within a journal that I kept hidden in the secret compartment of my desk. These are the locations of numerous operations happening around the kingdom. I explained before pointing to 3 points marked from the capital at northwest, northeast, and south. I want to quickly take these 2 drug farms north of the capital and the black market south quickly. I have no doubt that news of what has happened will quickly spread, regardless of father keeping it silent. But if we take these 3 bases first, that will help to delay news from spreading to other 8 Fingers members. What the team didn't need to know is that Kasha was already taking out numerous different operations before anyone could react. The map I had on display showed places that I could assault so as to gain fame and credibility for my eventual ascension to queendom. Interesting. Have you brought any other teams into this assault, or are we moving from location to location? Leques asked. I've sent 3 groups of orichalcum plates past those spots, with one going north of the capital, another heading northeast, and the last heading southwest. I answered truthfully. Evil Eye then pointed out a path leading to E. Pespel and E. Rantel. What of this area? Why is it completely clear of any 8-finger activity in comparison to the rest of the kingdom? From what's been learned, it's because the Fox Princess already eradicated those bases. Saying this, I pointed to 4 empty spots that Kasha had informed me of when creating this map. At least this goddess works fast. Seems we'll have to race to keep up if we don't want her taking out the 3 operations you want us on. Gagran noted, her tone thrumming with excitement over the competition. It will probably a good idea for us to start at the black market together before splitting up to take down the drug farms. One of the twins, the girl with blue in her clothing, said. That sounds doable. Especially because the 2 drug farms are close enough together that we can rush to each other's aid in a fast enough manner, Evil Eye agreed. Looks like we have our plan, Your Highness. We'll just need to pack up and prepare before leaving within the next 2 hours, Leques stated, finalizing their plan. Excellent. Soon, the kingdom will be freed from the awful shadow of 8 fingers. Thank you all for agreeing to this, I said as the ever-thankful Golden Princess. Thank us when we've completed this mission. Evil Eye answered. I'll make certain to thank all of you again once you have finished. I replied with a smile. Everything was going just according to plan. In a few days, I'll have the knowledge slip among the populace that the Golden Princess used her power and resources to hire adventurers to finish off the threat of 8 fingers once and for all so she could protect her people. At the same time, it would also be known that, while the Golden Princess was hard at work, Father and the other nobles were all in disagreement over the next course of action. It would give me the appearance of competence and urgency to fix the kingdom's issues while making the other nobles appear incompetent and slow. Following this, 2 things would happen. Barbro, once far enough away and unable to argue against it, will have information leak on his ties to 8 fingers. That will sour the opinion of the public against him, while most nobles would try distancing themselves from the man who had been working for a traitorous and power-hungry cousin of the king. That last part was a little embellishment, I added. From what Kasha told me, Barbro only worked with Hilma, who kept his ties to 8 fingers secret from the others to maneuver a stronger position within the organization. But the possibility that Barbro would try to aid another in treason and kin-killing would be more than enough to extinguish his right to rule. As for Zaynak, he was easy enough to deal with. I'd get him to simply abdicate. Over the years, I've noticed that my older brother is a pragmatic patriot to the kingdom. If I could get him to understand that I am the most competent of the family, and the best choice to ensure the kingdom's prosperity, he'd aid my bid for the throne. If not, then there was the other method. Tsunami is a powerful mage. In her repertoire of spells was control amnesia. With her agreement, we had planned to rewrite Zaynak's mind to have always been loyal to me. I kept that as my secondary option because editing his memories could be more noticeable to others compared to attaining his sponsorship. Everything was so simply coming together. Unknown. The sun was beginning to set across the Abelian hills as my squad and I made our scouting patrol outside the Great Wall. Our reasoning for doing so was because in the past week or 2, attacks on the Great Wall had just ceased. There didn't seem to be any obvious reason for this to occur, so we were sent to find out. I couldn't say for certain what might be going on, but ever since we first ventured out past the wall, I've been getting this uneasy feeling from the pit of my stomach. Yet, I kept my thoughts to myself, especially because the other members of my squad didn't have that fond of feelings for me. It was best to just keep quiet and follow orders. At the same time, looking at my squad mates, It was obvious that they felt something was wrong as well. They all tried to hide it, but something didn't feel right. It was hard to decide if I should feel happy that I wasn't going crazy with what I felt or extremely worried that we might all be in danger. I didn't let my gaze linger long on any of the other soldiers, else they might think that I'm glaring at them. Instead, I looked back towards our captain, the paladin named Francus. He was completely covered in heavy steel plate, with the only color bleeding through being the blue tabard over his armor and the small bits of brunette hair that poked out from under his helm. At the start of our mission, Francus had been quite jovial and talkative to each of us, me included. But as time went on, that friendly personality faded until only a serious expression remained on his face. Has anyone else noticed how quiet the area is? Jasper, a knight well on his way to becoming a paladin, asked. His green eyes scanned the area as his hand rested on the pommel of his sheathed sword. For once, I decided to speak up. Yes, sir. There should at least be animals making noise. It's just silence. Glancing at the small hills around us, I couldn't spot a single animal in the area. When something has the animals spooked like this, then it usually means that something dangerous has taken nest nearby, Anthony stated as he unslung his bow from his shoulder and pulled an arrow out from his quiver in cautious preparation. I followed him and did the same with my own bow. Then we're all in agreement that something feels off, Francus said in ominous agreement. Let's reach the top of the hill up ahead with the dead tree and see if we spot anything from that vantage point. If not, we head back to the wall and come out the next day with a larger squad. As Francus said this, he pointed to the tall hill ahead of us where what looked to be a red tree, devoid of all leaves, sat. But the further I continued to look at the tree, the more that something seemed wrong about it. But orders were orders. The sooner we reached the top of the hill, the sooner we could leave. So, I followed everyone else's yes, sir. With that, we quickly began trekking up the hill. By now, Francus had unholstered his mace, a weapon of green mithril, while Jasper unsheathed his steel sword. Bit by bit, we made our way up the hill, and as we did so, I noticed some strange red roots poking out from this hill at random intervals. And with the slowly setting sun, I thought that I could see these roots moving. Perhaps I was seeing things? I hope I was just seeing things. Odd plants on the ground. Never seen the like before. Jasper noted. It's a big world, Jasp. Can't see every plant that exists. Anthony answered back. The further we got up the hill, the more red roots seemed to cover it. Finally, when we reached the top, Francus stopped in his tracks, an action we all copied. By the gods! What is this? Francus, normally calm and collected, asked in shock and horror. Looking past him, I found my blood run cold. Up ahead was the red tree, with its twisting roots and branches. Sickeningly, I saw various animals grown into its branches that all seemed alive. Yet, towards the base of this tree of crimson wooden bodies, the tree seemed to have grown out from the body of an orc. Multiple roots and branches had burst from its body, but the worst part about it were the demi-human's eyes. They looked at us with terror, fully alive. Looking around the tree, I spotted multiple bundled masses of roots which I could see an arm or a leg sticking out of each. The twitching and slight thrashing of these limbs told me that more orcs had been ensnared by whatever this was and were still alive. Everyone, we need to leave, now. Francus ordered, which seemed to trigger immediate chaos. Roots shot out from the ground like spears, aimed at each of us. Francus stepped aside to avoid the root spear as Jasper blocked his arboreal attacker with the flat of his sword. I almost failed to react in time as the pointed end of a root aimed at my head. I managed to jump back quick enough to avoid being impaled before batting the root aside with my bow. But then I heard a cry of pain from Anthony and looked over to see a root that had fully pierced through his right breast. Watching frozen with a mixture of horror and morbid curiosity, I saw the tip of the root poking from his back seem to split into multiple parts before burrowing back into his body. Then, Anthony was forcibly yanked off his feet and over to a tiny mound of red roots. He tried fighting against the root and scrabbled to pull out a dagger and start hacking at the plants. Yet, all of it was in vain as he didn't have enough time before being brought in contact with the mound. The moment his body made contact with that writhing red mass, they sprung out and burrowed into more areas of his body, fully anchoring him as more roots wrapped around his body. All the while, he screamed in agony until most of his body was fully covered, muffling any further sounds he made. Yet, I could see his left arm sticking out of the cocoon thrash uselessly about. "Naya. Your left." Franca's voice pulled me back into the moment, and I looked over to see another root strike at me. This time, I wasn't as fast since a blinding pain erupted from my eye as the vision in it went dark. But even through that agony, I managed to pull away quick enough to avoid the root burrowing into me with a grotesque tearing. A scream of pain tore from my throat as I did this. Warm blood dripped down the left side of my face as I put my hand to the wet and raw wound before forcing myself to look over to the root I just dodged. What I saw filled me with a sense of horror and loss as impaled on the end of the root was what remained of my eyeball and the dangling optic nerve behind it. A moment later, Jasper charged over and cut down the root with his sword before it could try and attack me again. Shakily, I dropped my bow and pulled out my sword as Francis gave a shout, "Get down the hill. I'll cover you both." Following this, his mace glowed with a white light, smite. Smashing it down on a mass of roots attempting to strike him, they were all quickly obliterated in an instant. "Let's go, Naya," Jasper said as he began moving down the hill with me quickly following after. I slashed down another root aiming for me and hurried my pace. Ahead of Jasper and I, it seemed that the hill had fully come to life as red roots quickly started springing from the ground. Jasper made certain to cut down any roots in our path, and I did my best to strike any roots that escaped his attention. Behind the both of us, I could hear Francis continuing to fight, but I didn't have the chance to look behind and see how he was holding out. I could only trust that, as a paladin, some monstrous plants wouldn't be enough to bring him down. We were making quick headway down the hill as we fought for our lives. I slashed a root apart as it was about to hit me, yet I suddenly heard Francis scream from behind me and turned back to see our squad leader, a powerful paladin, having been impaled by multiple roots from different directions as he was brought to his knees. My heart was pounding as I watched Francis continue to try fighting, but I knew that it was over for him. There was nothing I could do for him as he'd share a fate just like Anthony. Turning away from him, I saw, to my horror, as two roots raised up behind Jasper like a scorpion's tail. I'd let myself be distracted from keeping any stray roots off him, and now he'd suffer for it. "Jasper! Behind you," I cried out, too late, as the roots impaled him just as he turned towards the threat. That was all it took as more roots took this moment of pause to stab into him and begin growing. I heard him screaming and thrashing as he was soon cocooned in roots, leaving only me remaining on this hill able to fight. Yet, I was doomed. Too many roots had grown out at the bottom of the hill, preventing me from moving forwards, and going back up the hill was a death sentence. My vision was starting to blur as blood continued leaking from my empty eye socket. More roots were growing around me, and I found myself slowly praying to any of the gods that might be listening to help me. I didn't want to die like this. Slashing another approaching root, I had to constantly keep turning my head to make up for my missing range of vision. But there were more roots growing than I could fight off. "Please, help me. Someone." I suddenly heard the loud cawing of a raven as lightning rained down around me and blasted apart any roots nearby. Then, my remaining vision was suddenly surrounded by a wall of black feathers and I felt my consciousness soon leave me.